Let's start with where you're from.
Calcutta.
Which part?
I'm adopted, I'm not really Indian. I'm starting to remember.
Saroo, our beautiful boy.
We're very proud of you, son.
A life I'd forgotten.
You okay?
I had another family. A mother. A brother. I can still see their faces.
What happened?
इधर जा मत मैं कल का काम निपट के आ जाऊंगा
गुड्डू गुड्डू
I have to find my way back home.
How long were you on the train?
A couple of days.
Couple of days.
It would take a lifetime to search all the stations in India.
Do you have any idea what it's like? How every day my real brother screams my name.
I always thought that I could keep this family together. I need you, Saroo. What if you do find home and they're not even there? And you just keep searching?
I don't have a choice.
What was she like?
Beautiful. Every night I imagine that I'm walking those streets home, and I know every single step of the way. And I whisper in her ear, I'm here.
One more time, let's hear it. And I go for the double applause on you because, as I said to you in the green room, it's not often that you get a movie made about your lives, and it's even more not often, if that's the right way to put it, that a good movie is made about your lives. Congratulations, it's a wonderful film.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Both of you are portrayed by some of the best actors and actresses that we have. You have Dev Patel and Nicole Kidman. Let's start from the beginning. It's based on your story in a book that you wrote in, was it 2013, 2011 that the book was published?
2013.
2013. How did they first approach you to sort of to turn this into a movie? And what were some of the, did you have any discrepancies or hesitations going into it?
It was everything just expedited so quickly from, finding my family in 2012 to all of a sudden, a book and then the movie just coming across. So, within sort of 6 months pretty much. But I guess, when you do sort of have a story and you've written it as a book, as your memoir, and then you sign those pieces of papers to get it to be into a motion picture. Sometimes it feels like it's been, sort of running away from you. And then you also feel, how sort of diluted it's going to be as well from having that creative sort of rights too. But I think being with Seesaw Films, it was really great because they just wanted to keep it so earthy and natural to the real currents. And that's why we went with Seesaw Films.
We had to have the trust that they would give our story the respect it needed and keep it authentic, and that was our main criteria because we didn't want it, made into something that it wasn't. So we're really happy that it was treated in that way, and it's turned out to be a movie like no other I've seen, and we couldn't be happier with the outcome. It's just everyone's put so much effort into it. It's wonderful.
Which they definitely do. They treat it with respect and authenticity, and one of the ways that I think that they do that is the depiction of your family. You have a wonderful family, but like any family, there are blemishes, there are problems, and the film is, you are okay as a family depicting that, and the film does a wonderful job of doing that as well. Did you ever have any hesitation as to how your family dynamic would be depicted?
Well, I was quite concerned about it, obviously. But once Saroo had written his book, and there were many chapters in that were quite close to the bone, if you like, and so once that was out, well, I thought, well, heck, now we're doing a film. There's no where to hide anymore. So let's just show it as it is, and that's exactly how it turned out. But I think in some ways, though, that if we'd glossed over the tough stuff, that wouldn't have been authentic. And also it creates a lot of opportunity for people to think about things they do in their lives because of that. Right from the bureaucrats who decided that Mantosh couldn't come to us for 2 years and really had his life potential ruined by bureaucrats. And yet Saroo came to us within 7 months and was fully able to settle and rehabilitate and make a wonderful life for himself. So the film shows that. It is rather raw, and Mantosh has found it quite difficult, but it is as it is. It is the truth, and I'm hoping that the film might improve situations with adoption in any country, really.
Talk about your story before the adoption. The film's photographic depiction of India and the child that plays you as a child. It's breathtaking. The filmmaking in that scenario. Is that how you remember it? Do you remember it looking like that and feeling like that?
Of course, like little Sonny Power. He's just amazing. Like, he's never sort of acted before, and his facial expressions. Like, I've watched the film about 20 times, well, 25 times now, because I've just been in India and doing the premiere. But I look at his face, and it's just crystal clear, pitch perfect, the way that it exemplifies little Saroo. And I just get drawn in so much. And that's incredible. It's just so touching to me. But I have a little sort of soft spot there. But he goes through this journey, this amazing journey, and such a resilient soul for him to sort of portray and personify little me. Just incredible.
Yeah. And for me, obviously, seeing what Saroo went through before he came to us was pretty touching, because we knew about these issues. Saroo had told us, but when I saw it again in front of my eyes with this darling little boy, and it was just so real, it really is quite cutting to watch that. And then furthermore, when he's in Australia with us, I'm able to relive those wonderful times with Saroo when he was little. The scenes like looking into the fridge and just so many things that are there. It's like having my little boy all over again.
Nicole Kidman's performance when bringing Saroo home is one of the most beautiful performances I think I've seen this year, if not in a movie. I mean, her eyes and the way that she looks at him and the sort of wonder and awe that she has brought me to tears when I was watching the film. Was it like that for you in that moment? Did that capture like how you felt as well?
Oh, definitely, because really meeting Saroo for the first time and being mindful of the fear he might be holding, how I handled him. I'd waited a long time and studied up the best way to go about doing things like the meeting. It was really so authentic, and I didn't want to create any fear in Saroo when we met by being too effusive. And anyway, I just did my best and it worked, and she has portrayed it perfectly.
Saroo, Dev portrays the sort of moments in your life when you started coming to grips with having to look at the past and sort of maybe and find your family. For the sake of an hour and a half long film, 2-hour film, it has to be obviously like crunched up a little bit. But what was that moment like for you? Was it as sort of momentary and it hit you as quickly as it seems in the movie, or was it over the course of time that you started to really think about going back and trying to find your family?
During sort of more my adult life, the upwelling became more prominent, and I think what you saw of going on Google Earth, that's quite obsessive behaviour, quite regimented too, because I didn't tell anyone that I was doing it. let alone I didn't even tell my family that I was doing it. I was sort of mucking around initially. It's a 6-year journey, and I didn't really know, what I was sort of getting into. But at
6-year journey?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sort of starting haphazardly on Google Earth and using, science and maths, and then also going sort of in the latter part of the 6 years to becoming more methodical in the way that you searched, and becoming regimented and being sort of unconventional about the way that you think about things really, really helped, because you had to escape this world and come into a different realm of a world that you found peace, and you could think without sort of people infiltrating and helping and convincing and manipulating into it's a needle in a haystack. You're not going to find it. So I think that scene is so beautiful, because that's the way it was. You just have hope and determination, and you're trying to autonomously transcend into finding what you've been looking for such a long time.
Yeah, for me, really, Saroo starting the journey had its origins in the couple of years he left home to go to uni, and that was the first time he'd lived away from our family home, and he reconnected with a lot of his student peers that were from India, and that was really rather lovely, and I was quite excited about that, because before that he hadn't really sought to do much of that reconnecting of people from India in Hobart. So he came home with some Indian clothing on one occasion, and I thought, what's going on here? It was really good, but overall we couldn't have been more proud of Saroo and the way he undertook his search, because the outcome was so wonderful.
What was it like for you during that 6 years where he kind of kept this a secret and was on his own search? I guess there's probably 5 years where you kept it a secret, or before you sort of came forward and said what you had been doing, or was it the entire 6 years that?
Entire 6 year, yeah.
Was that isolating or alienating?
Well, I isolated everyone, yeah. But the thing about it was I was so fearful, but I was so tactical too, because I found I achieved quicker and faster without people sort of intervening. And I felt, if I told anyone, or if I told, sort of people close to me, that they sort of veer me away from my main objective. So that was, I guess, going from haphazardly to becoming quite methodical, and then, not sort of having other people intervene. I don't know, it just happened that way. And I don't think it could have been any better, really.
Yeah. For me, I've had people say, were you disappointed or angry that Saroo kept this such a secret? But really, I'm not, because Saroo was becoming a man, and quite rightly he was making his own decisions, and I didn't have any resentment about that fact. And I got the icing on the cake, because then he found his first family and gave the news to us, and it was so exciting. It couldn't have been better, so I don't regret that Saroo searched on his own.
Take me back to the moment where you met your biological mother. What was that like?
I think it's an experience that you've got to be there, really. It's at a time where the earth and the time stood still. You've been longing for something of this sort of point in time for such a long time, thinking that you'd never sort of achieve it. And I guess, whilst sort of searching and all that, you also wanted to try and conquer that, trying to sort of your mind sort of, make it sort of think more than what we sort of in the realm and sort of in the social sort of capacity we sort of stay in, that we're bigger than what we think we are. And if we give our mind the opportunity to sort of, really outside the square that we live in, then we can sort of really, I guess the sky's your limit. So I was testing myself too, to see how intelligent that I could really get. And I think, I proved it by standing in front of my biological mother. She's looking at me and I'm looking at her. And for 25 years, I've been searching for her in my subconscious. but I get achievement. I guess achievement is relative to effort, and it was such a pivotal time where we, sort of hugged and kissed and sort of cried a lot, because for her, I've been, gone away. 25 years ago, I vanished like a ghost, and all of a sudden I reappeared, materialised on this Sunday afternoon, just standing in front of her. So, extremely emotional time.
You say you just premiered the film in India. Has she seen it?
Yes, she has, and I was right next to her, and she just had tears pouring down, because there's myself and there's my brother as well, Gudu, who came along on the train ride, and she remembers to the point where we're all playing as a family, and then all of a sudden my brother and I, we sort of left off that night, and she never saw it. So there's telling her what happened, but in that sense, but then visually, letting her see what really happened was extremely powerful, and that's just something that I think she needed to see to really sort of feel that this is the way that it really went, as opposed to having her own imagination of what she thinks really happened.
I think with the film for mothers, I could fill in the gaps with the things that I didn't see, as in Saroo's early years. And for Kamala, she could fill in the gaps of Saroo's life that she didn't see. And they're absolutely intense needs within you that you really feel you have to get that information. So, I really would have loved to have been with Kamala when she saw the film for the first time. Anyway, we're rolling on the journey and sharing our story, but I think, it would have been pretty tough for her as it was for me. You just can't explain the intensity of that feeling.
And you've met her.
I have. I met Kamala in May 13, and I went over to India with Saroo. It was for a 60-minute story, but it was so well done. But it was just the most amazing experience, and we drove in as far as we could go with a vehicle, and then Saroo led me along the lane, and she was waiting there, and there were cameras and things there, but quite frankly, I to this day cannot remember seeing them. I just sort of went into this bubble, if you like, and we had a translator and we held each other, and I wanted to ask her a couple of things. So I asked the interpreter to say to Kamala, did you always feel that Saroo was still alive? And she said yes. And, for me, that was just the most incredible thing. And I thought, oh my goodness, every night of your life going to sleep in these conditions, trusting that your little boy's still alive. But as she said, she had not seen his body, so she just kept that up. And she's a very spiritual woman and sought guidance from advisors who said, your son is still alive, and she believes that. So then the next thing that made me cry, and there I am standing there in the dirt in the street, and she's trying to comfort me and wipe away my tears, which, I had the good life, really. I had the blessing of her son. And then she said to me through the interpreter, don't cry, he's your son, I give you my son. And I lost it then, it was just the most heartfelt gift. I really can't explain it further than that, but it was just really something I'll never forget.
Do you want to say, you don't want me to cry, don't say things like that to me?
Oh. Well, if I do, you can too. Anyway, as a woman, as a mother, I just could not be more fortunate and lucky and happy.
I have to ask, going backwards a little bit, and we kind of already talked about this, but what did you think when Saroo finally showed you everything that he was working on? Was there a part of you that was kind of like, it is a needle in the haystack, and you wanted to sort of, talk him out of looking for this because he'd most likely come up empty? I mean, it's a miracle that you didn't come up empty-handed in your search. It's a beautiful, incredible miracle, and I think any sort of rational person who wasn't in the search with you would be like, hey, it's not going to work out, buddy. I'm really sorry. How did you sort of not say
Well-
that to him and be supportive?
Well, for me, John and I did not know that Saroo had been searching. All those years he'd kept it a secret, which, I accept that. That's a man's decision to do that. So he went into the office one morning and sat down in front of John and said, "Dad, I think I've found my home. I think I've found where I've come from." And of course, John was rather speechless, but then he understood why Saroo was always late for work. Anyway, so we had the pleasure of that. I mean, I guess I would have said, "We'll help, don't tear yourself apart." But by the time he'd succeeded, he had been successful. And the only thing that might have been a problem is if he'd got there and his mother hadn't stayed there. But I just had a feeling, I just sort of feel that I had a trust that he would succeed. I've always trusted that Saroo will succeed in whatever he does. And he did, so that's just how it happened.
Saroo, what's it like having you were adopted by this wonderful family. You lived in Australia. You were given an incredible life and opportunities, and then you find your mother, and she is still living in this village. And prior to being adopted, she worked as collecting rocks, essentially, for a very small amount of pay. What's that feeling like to sort of go back and see her and then go back to your other life in Australia? How do you sort of reckon with those things?
I don't really let it sort of come over me. I'm quite sort of segregated with those feelings. I just think that life is meant to be the way it is. Why put so much brain strain into something that it's not going to have a lot of effect? It's just going to make you feel down or give you sort of other opinions that are not necessarily warranted. So I think what's happened to me in sort of my trajectory of from where I started to where I became to what's happened to my biological mother. It's just the way it happened to be. I'm not going to sort of cry over spilt milk because I went through all the trials and tribulations and hardship. But taking that into account and then answering your question, it's just I don't think there's any issues between myself, my biological mother, and my mum Suzanne here as well. It's we're all happy, we all live in harmony, and I helped my mother out by giving her some money and also buying her a house as well. That back 29 years ago now, we would never been able to afford it because we lived in the slums and went through adversity. So, we all have done some hardship, but it doesn't mean it consumes you and takes you down. So, but it's great. Life is awesome.
I really like the phrase brain strain. Thank you for giving that to me now. I'm going to open it up to the audience for some questions. Who has questions out here? You have a microphone.
I had the opportunity to hear you speak at a screening here in New York that an adoption institute hosted, and it was very powerful, and I wondered if you could speak to how, through the book and film, your personal narrative has resonated within the foster and adoption community.
Well, look, there's so many people that have just sort of come forth out from the shadows and has made them, it's been so enthralling to them that they need to speak up as well about things which, it's an extremely personal story, not to myself, but, the other people too, not just from India, but from the globe, in every nation. And so there are all these stories coming around from adopted children to people that have lost family and so on. And they all want to sort of, search for what they've been longing for such a long time. I think this is probably the panacea that they've been looking for such a long time to, sort of open them up and talk to people about it, including their friends. Mm. And for me, I've been sort of walking for such a long time with all these weights on my shoulders, trying to find a resolution and by listening to myself in my dreams, I had succeeded. And I think, by people reading the book and seeing the movie, I hope, they sort of find what they've been longing for, and those weights on their shoulders do sort of come off.
Yeah. I think probably for me, I'm hoping that it'll raise a lot more discussion about adoption. In Australia, adoption isn't sort of thought of so well because of the ways that we've treated adoption over the decades, and we have very little adoption now. So I'm hoping that it'll create a lot more demand. I'm also hoping that adoption will be a way to deal with the millions of refugee children unaccompanied and orphaned overseas, particularly in the Middle East, that have really no hope, and they're the forgotten refugees. So there I see wonderful families waiting to be created, and I want people to educate themselves and make themselves worthy of receiving another woman's child. I really just hope that everyone starts thinking a little more humanely. I just think the world needs to, because there's such a great need.
What's it like for the two of you to be sort of touring with this film and talking to people about it, specifically in this country right now, while we're in the midst of judicial disagreements about an immigration ban that specifically affects refugees that you spoke of?
Well, it's a very sensitive thing here, obviously, that people are rather fragile at the moment. But in Australia, we're sort of quite settled politically, and it's a much smaller country, of course. But the thing that is the problem for us there is that the availability of adoption is very minimal. Even though we've got agreements with many countries, we don't actually facilitate them, and so we
had agreements. Sorry.
Well, we have in Australia. We still have them. But you guys don't have them now, I believe, and I just can't think why we should be going backwards in this. Then on the other hand, you travel into places, into Europe and so forth, of which I've done in the last couple of years, and it's very difficult. It's a very tricky question, because you go to places where it's, their culture and their cities and towns are quite affected by a lot of refugee intake, but just mainly it seems of a particular kind of refugee, where I think the refugees that should come first are the children. So that puts me at odds with a lot of refugee availability and planning. I've got my priorities set a little differently.
My joke was glib, but we should be sort of maintaining our agreements with Australia. If the majority of Americans have anything to say about it, hopefully we will. Next question.
Sorry. As a fellow Australian, thank you for exporting your wonderful stories, and I'm really proud of the story that you've portrayed. And if I was working for Kleenex, I'd also be thanking you, because there certainly wasn't a dry eye in the cinema. My question really to you is, was there a point at which you would have stopped searching? And my second part of that is, if not, what is the message that you would have for people who face similar levels of adversity as you had?
Look, there was plenty of times where you sort of thought that you should stop because it's driving you nuts. You're going around in circles, and not realising that you're affecting people too at the same time. But it was something that you had to, maintain and keep going to achieve. But there was times when at night you sort of put the laptop down and walk away in dismay, because, when you zoom in to Harrow train station and then start following these railway tracks and then zoom back out, you've only gone sort of, a centimetre. And, are you going around circles? Have you sort of redone things? It was just crazy. And you sort of go to sleep, then you wake up and, you don't know what time it is. It was, I thought I was going crazy, but I had to keep myself sort of regimented. But, I think at the end of the day, this film and this story is amazing to people. And for me, the reason for writing it and putting it out there, because I had a choice, I didn't have to put it out there. But there's the humanitarian side to it, and to empower and encourage other people in a similar situation is the best thing that I could have really wanted. because, like I said before, it's not great living every day with sort of these weights on your shoulders and having that nostalgia, the reminiscing of your past, identity crisis, you know. I think if this film goes out to those people, and I think there's more out there too that haven't seen it, that they can be empowered by it.
I have to ask, I interviewed Dev Patel for the film, and I asked him what you thought of his performance and what kind of conversations you had. And he said the only thing that you said to him, he said that you liked the performance, but that you wished he was bigger. That you wish he had, is that true? Did you tell him that you wished he had been a bit bigger?
Yeah, look, I think he was pretty good. He certainly did an amazing job, and but yeah, he worked out and like went to the gym and pumped some weights and had lots of meat to protein and.
He did put on some weight, and I think really when I was hugging him, he felt very much like Saroo at that age. Dev's 26, and Saroo was probably very much like that, and so was little Sonny when I held him. It was just, I could shut my eyes and just imagine Saroo back then. It was just so divine.
I think we have time for one more question right here.
Thank you for being here. Can you describe what the awards season experience has been like for you thus far?
Well, it's just another dimension, another level. But hey, look, you got to remember that 4 years ago I started this, and I started it from the search in my memories of everything to becoming a documentary to becoming a book that published in 2013 and came out in 2014 and became an international bestseller. And so I was driving it along, and it's from sort of taking the book out to the world and touring and talking to people as yourself and others. That was one level, but now sort of being a motion picture is another level, and it's a great experience. And I think the way to sort of conclude is just say, well, let's have fun, because we've just put so much effort into this, and here it is, the fruits of your labour.
Unbelievable. I have to let the two of you go. Thank you so much for being here. Lion is in theaters right now. Congratulations on a beautiful film and a wonderful story. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.